The sun was barely rising over the small village when Alina woke up with a heavy heart. Today was the day she had dreaded for months. The day she was supposed to marry a man she barely knew in front of the entire community. The old traditions left no room for her own desires or feelings. Her parents had made it clear this marriage was for the family's honor and future, not for love. Her hands trembled as she sat at the edge of the wooden bed, memories flooding her mind. Just months ago, she had been hopeful, dreaming of a different life, one where she could make her own choices. But fate had other plans. The groom, a stern and distant man named Victor, was known throughout the village for his wealth and influence. Though he had never spoken more than a few words to her, his reputation as a harsh and unfeeling man spread like wildfire. Alina wondered if this marriage was a prison disguised as a blessing, as the morning light filtered through the thin curtains. The sounds of the village preparing for the wedding echoed outside. Neighbors bustled about, decorating the square, preparing food, and gossiping about the upcoming union. Everyone expected Alina to smile, to accept her fate with grace. Her mother knocked gently on the door, stepping in with a tight smile. "Alina, it's time. Everyone is waiting." Alina nodded, swallowing her fear. She stood and walked to the mirror, staring at the reflection of the young woman forced into a life she never chose. The white dress was beautiful, but it felt like a shroud, a symbol of her captivity. The journey to the village square was slow and torturous. Eyes followed her every step, whispers trailing behind her like shadows. The men nodded approvingly at Victor, while the women looked at Alina with a mixture of pity and judgment. The ceremony began with the village priest reciting ancient vows. His voice steady and unyielding. Victor stood beside her, his expression unreadable. When the moment came to exchange rings, Alina's heart pounded in her chest like a wild drum. But just as Victor reached out to take her hand, Alina's mind flashed to the secret she carried, a secret that could shatter everything. The child growing inside her was not his dot. Tears welled up as the weight of her truth crushed her from within. This child, the result of a fleeting love she barely dared to admit, was her hope and her curse. To speak now would bring shame and chaos. But to stay silent would be a lie that destroyed her soul. Her voice trembled, breaking the silence like thunder. "Wait," she whispered. All eyes turned toward her, surprise and confusion rippling through the crowd. Alina took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage. "The child I carry is not your son." Gasps erupted around the square. Victor's face twisted in anger and disbelief. The village fell into stunned silence. Her father's face went pale, his jaw tightening as he struggled to find words. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. Caught between shame and sorrow, Alina knew the path ahead would be difficult. But for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of freedom. She had spoken the truth, and nothing could take that away from her. The village square was frozen in disbelief. Alina's confession hung heavy in the air, like a storm ready to break. No one dared to move or speak for several long moments. The murmur of shocked whispers slowly grew into a cacophony of gasps, questions, and accusations. Victor stepped back, his face darkening with fury. "What do you mean, not my son?" he spat, his voice sharp and cold. "Are you accusing me of raising a child that isn't mine? Do you think this is some kind of joke?" Alina's heart pounded violently, but she stood her ground. "I'm not joking. The child I'm carrying belongs to another man." The crowd murmured again, some casting wary glances at her, others glaring at Victor. Her words had shattered the carefully constructed facade of the wedding, and now everyone's eyes were on her, demanding answers. Her father, once proud and commanding, looked defeated. "Alina, this is madness. You don't understand the consequences of what you're saying." Her mother's sobs were barely audible. "You've brought shame to this family." Alina's cheeks flushed with humiliation, but she refused to back down. "I'm sorry, but I can't lie anymore. I won't live a life built on lies." Victor's expression turned from anger to something colder, a dangerous, calculating look. "Who is the father?" he demanded, stepping closer to her. Alina hesitated, knowing that naming the man would unleash even more scandal. But the truth was already out. There was no hiding anymore. "It's Mark," she said quietly. "A man I loved before all this was forced on me." At the mention of Mark's name, whispers intensified. Mark was a handsome stranger who had passed through the village months ago, a man of mystery and kindness. Alina's brief encounter with him had changed her. But the relationship was brief and impossible to pursue in the rigid world she lived in. Victor's face contorted with rage. "Mark, that insolent outsider, you would bring his child into my family's name." Alina shook her head. "No, Victor. This child will never carry your name. But I won't marry you. not under these lies. The village elder stepped forward, raising a hand for silence. This is not how things are done. Alina, you are bound by tradition. You will marry Victor, and the child will be accepted. There is no other way. But Elena's resolve only grew stronger. I refuse to be a prisoner in a life that is not mine. I will not marry someone who does not love me, who treats me like a possession. Her mother's tears flowed freely now, her voice breaking. What will become of us, of our family? You have broken the bonds that held us together. Elena's heart ached for her family, but she could no longer sacrifice herself for their honor. Sometimes, breaking is the only way to heal. Victor's voice rose in anger. You will regret this. I promise you, Alina, you will regret this day. Suddenly, Mark appeared at the edge of the crowd, his eyes full of concern and determination. Alina, he called softly, stepping forward. I'm here. Whatever happens, you're not alone. The villagers gasped at his unexpected arrival. Some stepped back in suspicion. Others whispered about the scandal deepening. Elena's gaze softened as she looked at Mark. In that moment, she felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, her life could change. But the road ahead was uncertain and full of challenges. The secrets, the lies, and the expectations of the village would not disappear. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Alina made a silent vow to fight for her truth, no matter the cost. Mark's sudden appearance sent ripples through the crowd. Whispers turned into shocked murmurs, and a few people gasped outright. Elena's heart raced not just from relief, but from the danger they now both faced. The village was a place where outsiders were viewed with suspicion, and Mark's arrival at such a pivotal moment was bound to stir more trouble. Victor's eyes narrowed. His jaw clenched tight as he stared at Mark. You have no right to interfere in our affairs, he hissed. This is a matter of family honor, and you're nothing but an outsider. Mark didn't back down. His voice was steady, yet filled with quiet intensity. I love Alina. I never wanted her to be trapped in this forced marriage. She deserves to choose her own path. Some villagers began whispering among themselves, while others looked sternly at Mark and Alina. Tradition was deeply rooted here. Defying it could mean exile, scandal, and ruin. Elena's father stepped forward, his face red with anger and shame. Mark, you think you can just walk into our lives and disrupt everything? You have no place here. Alina, come home now. We will fix this. Elena's resolve didn't waver. No, father, this isn't just about tradition, it's about respect and truth. I won't marry Victor, and I won't deny this child. Her mother's tears flowed freely as she pleaded. Please, Alina, think of our family. The village, the shame, I have thought of nothing else. Alina interrupted. But I won't sacrifice my future for their judgment. Victor's voice cut sharply through the tension. You've embarrassed us all. If you don't marry me, you bring disgrace not only to your family, but to the entire village. Suddenly, a voice from the back of the crowd rose. It was Clara, Alina's childhood friend. Why should Alina live a lie? Shouldn't love be the foundation of a marriage? If the village is so quick to judge, maybe it's the tradition that needs to change. A few heads turned toward Clara, surprised by her boldness. Her words sparked a ripple of murmurs, some nodding in agreement, others frowning in disapproval. Alina caught Clara's eye and gave a small, grateful smile. She was not alone. Bach stepped closer to Alina and whispered, We can leave this place. Start fresh, somewhere no one knows us. I will protect you and our child. Alina's heart ached at the thought of abandoning her family, her home, and everything she'd ever known. Yet the promise of freedom was intoxicating. Before she could respond, Victor's men pushed through the crowd, grabbing Mark roughly by the arm. You'll leave of your own accord, and soon, or we'll make you leave. Mark struggled, but the grip was firm. Alina felt a surge of panic. Let him go. She cried out. The village elder raised his voice, trying to restore order. Enough. Violence solves nothing. Alina, this dispute must be settled peacefully. You will come with us to discuss this privately. Alina glanced back at Mark, whose eyes were filled with determination and pain. She nodded, signaling she would face whatever came next, but only on her terms. As she was led away, whispers followed her like a shadow. The road ahead was uncertain and filled with danger, but for the first time, Alina knew she had taken the first step toward freedom. The village elder's home was an old stone house at the edge of the square, its walls steeped in history and tradition. Alina was escorted inside by a few villagers who looked torn between sympathy and duty. The heavy wooden door closed behind them with a thud, sealing Alina's fate, or so it seemed. Inside, the elder sat at a large oak table, his face grave but thoughtful. Victor and Elena's father stood by the window, their expressions unreadable. Elena's mother sat quietly in a corner, wiping away tears. The elder cleared his throat. Elena, you have spoken your truth in front of the entire village. This has brought shame and unrest. But we must find a path forward for the sake of the child, for your family, and for the village. Elena took a deep breath, summoning her courage. I am willing to accept consequences, but I will not marry Victor. I want to raise my child with love and honesty, not under false pretenses. Victor scoffed. And what about my honor? Am I to be made a fool in front of all these people? The child is not mine, and I refuse to raise a bastard. The elder nodded slowly. Victor, you are entitled to your feelings, but consider the consequences of your rejection. The child will be part of this community, whether you accept it or not. Elena's father spoke up, his voice trembling with frustration. We have always followed tradition to maintain order, but perhaps it is time to reconsider. Elena's bravery forces us to face uncomfortable truths. Elena felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, change was possible. The elder continued, Elena, you will be given shelter and support from the village. Your child will be accepted as yours. But the marriage contract with Victor will be annulled. A murmur spread among those present. Some nodded in approval. Others looked shocked. Victor slammed his fist on the table. This is an insult. I will not be made a laughingstock. The elder's gaze was firm. Victor, you must choose. Accept the annulment and live with your honor intact, or face the consequences of defying the village. Victor's face darkened. He stormed out of the room, leaving a trail of anger behind him. Elena exhaled deeply. The battle was not over, but a crucial victory had been won. Her mother approached hesitantly. You have brought change, Elena, but be prepared, not everyone will accept it easily. Elena nodded. I am ready. For my child, I will face whatever comes. As she looked out the window, the village square below was slowly returning to normal. But Elena knew that the real struggle was just beginning. The whispers would follow her for years, and some would never forgive. Yet she felt stronger than ever. The truth had set her on a new path, one she was determined to follow, no matter the obstacles. The days following the annulment were a whirlwind of emotions for Elena. Some villagers offered quiet support, their eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and sympathy. Others whispered behind her back, their judgments sharp and unforgiving. But through it all, Elena held on to the small flame of hope that had been kindled by the elder's decision. Her parents struggled to come to terms with the new reality. Father, once proud and rigid, softened as he saw his daughter's strength and the growing life within her. Perhaps we were too harsh, he admitted one evening, sitting beside Elena in the small kitchen. But tradition has always been our guide. Elena smiled faintly. Traditions can change, father. They have to if they hurt those they're meant to protect. Her mother nodded silently, tears glistening in her eyes. I only want you to be safe, Elena, to be happy. Safety was a luxury Elena wasn't sure she could afford in a village that thrived on conformity. Victor's anger hadn't faded, and rumors of his plans to ruin her reputation swirled like a dark cloud. One afternoon, as Elena walked through the marketplace, a group of women stopped talking and stared at her. Their eyes were cold, and their whispers reached her ears. She brought shame. What kind of mother will she be? Elena's chest tightened, but she held her head high. She had made her choice, and she would face whatever came with courage. Botmark remained her steadfast supporter, visiting whenever he could. Together, they made plans for the future, a future that seemed both terrifying and thrilling. I want us to leave the village once the baby is born, Mark said one evening as they sat beneath the stars. There's a world beyond these fields and mountains, a world where we can build a life together. Elena looked at him, her heart aching with love and fear. It's not that simple. My family, the village. They won't let me go. Mark took her hands in his, then we'll face it together. Whatever comes, I'll protect you and our child. The promise gave Elena strength. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to dream. But Victor was not done. One night, a shadow fell over her window. Elena startled awake to find him standing outside, his eyes blazing with fury. You think you can escape me, he growled. I will not let you ruin everything. Elena's pulse raced. She knew the battle was far from over. The next days were tense. Victor's threats grew more aggressive, and the village seemed divided, torn between upholding tradition and embracing change. Elena found solace in her growing bond with Mark and the life stirring within her. Each kick, each flutter, reminded her why she fought for love, for truth, and for a future she could call her own. Asterisk, as the weeks passed, Elena's pregnancy became more visible, and the whispers in the village grew louder. Some villagers offered help discreetly, an extra loaf of bread, a warm blanket, a kind smile, while others avoided her altogether. The division in the community was palpable, and Alina felt both isolated and supported in ways she hadn't expected. Mark was a constant presence, his determination unwavering. They spent evenings planning a future that felt both close and distant. "We need to find a place where no one knows us," he said one night, tracing circles on her hand. "A fresh start." Alina nodded, though part of her heart ached at the thought of leaving her home, her family, and the only life she'd ever known. "I want to believe it's possible." Her mother surprised her one afternoon with a quiet visit. "I've been thinking," she said, sitting beside Alina on the creaky wooden bench outside their house. "Maybe it's time I stopped fearing what the village will say. You are my daughter, and you deserve happiness." Alina reached out and squeezed her mother's hand, tears welling up. "Thank you. That means more than you know." But Victor's shadow loomed large. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, he confronted Alina in the market square, his voice low but threatening. "You think you can steal what's mine? You're nothing but a liar." Alina held her ground. "The truth is mine. You don't own me." His laugh was bitter. "We'll see how long you last." That night, Alina found herself unable to sleep. Mark's words echoing in her mind. "Whatever comes, I'll protect you." But protection felt fragile against the storm gathering around them. The village elder called a meeting, urging the community to accept Alina's child and the new path she represented. "Our traditions must grow," he said. "We cannot lose our humanity to pride." Slowly, some villagers began to change their tune, offering cautious support. Others resisted fiercely, clinging to old ways. Alina understood now that her fight was not just for herself, but for every woman who had ever been silenced. As the first snowflakes of winter fell, Alina and Mark prepared to leave the village. It was a bittersweet farewell, a closing chapter, and the beginning of another. Together, they stepped into the unknown, carrying with them the hope of a new life, built on love, truth, and courage. Asterisk, the morning air was crisp and filled with a quiet tension as Alina packed the last of her belongings. The decision to leave the village had been painful but necessary. Every familiar corner, every face held memories, some sweet, others painful. But staying meant surrendering her truth and the future of her child. Mark stood by her side, his presence a steady comfort amid the uncertainty. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Alina nodded, though her heart fluttered with fear. "As ready as I'll ever be." They set out together, leaving behind the village that had shaped their lives but also tried to chain them. The path ahead was uncertain, winding through dense forests and open fields. But it was theirs to walk. The first few days were difficult. They faced biting cold nights, scarce food, and the weight of leaving everything behind. But their resolve was stronger than any hardship. During a quiet moment, Alina shared her fears. "What if we never find a place to call home? What if people don't accept us?" Mark took her hands in his gaze. "We'll build our own home. With love and honesty, we'll create a family no one can take away." Alina smiled, warmed by his words. Hope began to grow inside her, bright and fierce. One afternoon, as they traveled through a small town, they encountered kindness from strangers. A woman offered them food and shelter, moved by Alina's story and Mark's devotion. It was the first sign that not all places were ruled by judgment and tradition. As Alina's belly grew rounder with each passing week, so did her determination. She was no longer just a girl forced into marriage, she was a mother, a woman fighting for a new beginning. But even in this newfound hope, shadows from the past lingered. Letters arrived from the village, threats veiled in polite words, warnings to return or face consequences. Mark burned them without hesitation. "We don't belong there anymore. Our future is here." Alina nodded, tears in her eyes. Together? The small cottage they found nestled in a quiet valley was humble but full of promise. Its wooden walls creaked softly, and the garden outside was wild but alive with potential. For the first time in months, Alina felt a glimmer of peace. They set to work transforming the space into a home. Mark built shelves and repaired windows, while Alina planted seeds and cleaned the rooms. The physical labor was tiring but grounding, a welcome distraction from the fears that still lurked in the back of her mind. At night, they would sit by the fire, talking about their dreams and the life they wanted to build for their child. Alina's hands often rested on her growing belly, feeling the small movements of the life inside her. "You're going to be a wonderful mother," Mark said one evening, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Alina smiled softly. I want this child to grow up knowing love, not fear or shame. Their days were filled with simple joys, but the past was never far behind. Letters from the village stopped for a time, but Alina knew it was only a matter of time before the shadows returned. One afternoon, a stranger arrived at their door, a traveler passing through who had heard whispers of Elena's story. He brought news from the village, stories of Victor's continued anger and attempts to discredit her. Alina listened quietly, the weight of the past pressing down, but she no longer felt powerless. I have a choice now, she said, to run or to stand. I choose to stand. Mark nodded, pride shining in his eyes. We face whatever comes together. As winter deepened, Elena's strength grew. The child inside her was a symbol of hope and defiance. No matter what the world threw their way, she would protect this new life with everything she had. The journey had been long and difficult, but Alina knew that this was only the beginning of a new story, one she would write with courage and love. Winter's grip tightened, blanketing the valley in snow and silence. Inside their cottage, warmth and light persisted, a stark contrast to the cold world outside. Elena's due date was drawing near, and with each passing day, anticipation mingled with fear. Mark remained steadfast, preparing for the arrival of their child with a tenderness Alina had never known. He crafted a cradle from reclaimed wood, soft blankets stitched with care, and stocked the shelves with herbs and remedies from a local healer. Despite the peace they had found, the outside world's reach was relentless. Rumors from the village whispered through the wind, a mixture of resentment, pity, and curiosity. One bitter evening, as a storm raged outside, a knock came at their door. Mark opened it cautiously to find a woman, Elena's childhood friend, Clara, wrapped in a heavy cloak. Her eyes filled with both fear and hope. I had to come, Clara said softly. I couldn't bear to see you suffer from afar. Alina embraced her friend, tears tracing silent paths down their cheeks. Clara brought news from the village. Some hearts were beginning to change, inspired by Elena's courage, but many still clung stubbornly to old grudges. Together, they shared stories and plans. Clara offered to help spread word of Elena's strength, hoping to inspire others trapped by tradition. The storm outside seemed to mirror the tumult within Elena's heart. She was close to giving birth, yet uncertain about what awaited beyond the safety of their home. In the quiet moments between contractions, she whispered promises to her unborn child. You will grow up free. You will know love and truth. I will protect you no matter what. Mark held her hand, his voice steady. You're the strongest person I know. We'll face this together. When the long night finally gave way to dawn, a new life entered the world, a son, healthy and strong. Alina held him close, tears of relief and joy streaming down her face. In that fragile moment, all the pain and struggle faded. There was only love, fierce, unyielding, and pure. The days after the birth were filled with quiet joy and newfound hope. Alina cradled her son, his tiny fingers curling around hers, a living testament to her courage and truth. The struggles of the past months, the pain and fear seemed to melt away in the warmth of this new life. Mark was ever by her side, his eyes shining with pride and love. Together, they nurtured their family, building a life free from the shadows of the past. News of Elena's child spread slowly through the village. The story of her defiance, her refusal to bow to tradition, inspired whispers of change. Some villagers began to question old customs. Others held tightly to them. But Alina no longer feared their judgment. Her parents, once torn between shame and love, embraced her and her son. You have brought light into our lives, her mother said softly, tears in her eyes. Victor, however, had vanished from the village. Rumors swirled that his pride and anger had driven him away, leaving behind only bitterness. Alina understood that the road ahead would still have challenges, but she no longer walked it alone or afraid. One evening, as the sun set in hues of gold and pink, Alina stood outside their cottage, her son asleep inside. Mark joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. We've come a long way, he said quietly. Alina smiled, her heart full. And we still have a long way to go. But now, it's our story too, right? Together, they looked toward the horizon, toward a future shaped by love, truth, and the courage to stand up for what matters most. Elena's voice echoed softly in the twilight. I was forced to marry him in front of everyone, but I said, he's not your son. And that moment changed everything. Months had passed since Elena's brave confession and the birth of her son, Lucas. Life had not been easy, but it was theirs, filled with love, resilience, and newfound freedom. The village, once steeped in rigid tradition and whispered judgments, was slowly changing. Word of Elena's courage spread beyond the valley. Young women began to speak more openly about their own desires and dreams. Inspired by the woman who had dared to stand against the tide, even some elders softened their views, realizing that compassion and truth could strengthen, not weaken, the community. Elena's parents had become her fiercest supporters, proudly introducing their grandson to the village. Their transformation was a testament to the power of love to heal old wounds. Victor was never seen again, his bitterness fading into a distant memory. Elena sat on the porch of their modest home, Lucas playing at her feet, his laughter ringing like music in the warm afternoon air. Mark stood beside her, watching with a gentle smile. "We did it," Elena whispered, her eyes shining with gratitude and hope. "We built a life on truth and love." Mark kissed her forehead. "And it's only the beginning." Together, they faced the future, no longer bound by fear or expectation, but free to write their own story. A story of courage, healing, and the unbreakable bonds of family.